Welcome to the IoT Unicorn Podcast. This is Pete Bernard from Microsoft, and this podcast is for anyone interested in the long-term technology trends in the IoT space and the journey from here to there. So let's get started. Coming up on this next episode of the IoT Unicorn, we spend some quality time with Rene Haas, who is the president of ARM IP. And of course, we'll touch upon some of the latest news about ARM and NVIDIA. It turns out Rene is a former NVIDIA employee, so coming full circle on that. Also, interestingly, some of the advances ARM has made with partners in the hyperscaler cloud space for power-efficient servers. One of my favorite topics, Windows on Snapdragon, and what's been happening there over the past few years. And then moving forward, where IoT is heading in terms of low power AI acceleration, and a lot of the innovations happening on the very far edge with IoT and devices that are powered by ARM and its partners. So pretty good show. And we have the Dev Summit coming up from ARM, which is very timely, and hopefully people can enjoy that as well. And if you haven't registered, you probably should. Okay, so here's Rene. Rene, thanks again for joining us here on the IoT Unicorn.
You're a natural at this. Have you done this in a previous life?
I did work at the radio station at Boston University way back when, but that was a long time ago. That was mostly just Pink Floyd records, so that wasn't a lot of talking. But no, it's been a lot of fun actually. This has been good, and the idea for the podcast was sort of like I typically would be having these conversations anyway with partners in like a back of a cab or whatever. So we're like, record them and turn them into a podcast. So it's like,
That's funny. I went to Clarkson University and I was also a Pink Floyd DJ.
Oh, yes, of course. Well, in some form or another. I was trying to remember the last time actually we saw each other face to face. It's something that we do these days. I think it was like Barcelona 2019 or something. It was a while ago. But again, thanks for joining us today.
You are welcome. I wasn't sure it was CES of 2020, but gosh, you might be right. Barcelona 2019. My gosh, over 18 months ago.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. Well, CES 2020 was kind of our last. It was kind of the last hurrah, for events. Although going to Vegas always has its potential infection rates of all sorts of things going on there, but not in that case. But cool. Yeah, no, it's good to see you again, and. We've known each other for a little while and worked on some interesting projects. So it was great to have you on the show, and obviously very timely with the Dev Summit coming up and some recent news that we'll talk about as well. But maybe you can give us and the listeners a little background on your journey to where you're at as president of ARM IP.
Sure. No, happy to do that. I'd probably call myself a veteran, if you will, of the semiconductor industry. I've been in it my entire career. Started at TI, back when TI was the largest semiconductor company on the planet in the middle 80s, and I've worked a combination of jobs in semiconductor IP as well as semiconductor companies. So I've been around it my entire career. So my role at ARM is I run the IP products group. Our acronym is IPG, Intellectual Property Products Group, and that's the sales, marketing, development of all of our products, GPUs, CPUs, NPUs for the markets that we serve, the client market, infrastructure market, automotive, autonomous, and IoT. I am in the Bay Area now, but I've had a fun journey at ARM. I have spent 7 years at ARM, but only a few years in the Bay Area. I was in Shanghai, China for 2 years, and I was in the UK for 3, living in London, commuting to Cambridge, and just came back to the Bay Area at the beginning of 2020. And
are you a original California person, or where'd you?
I'm originally from upstate New York. Yeah, originally from upstate New York. My dad was a Xerox guy, so I was a son of a Xerox guy working in. He was working in Rochester, New York, which is where I grew up, and then. Came out to California in the mid 1990s and have been here since.
I'm a New Jersey person myself. That's something we have in common. The tri-state area. Although Rochester is pretty far upstate there. So
serious snow country.
Serious. Yes. Good. Good. Excellent. So you've been at ARM for a while then, and you also spent a little bit of time at NVIDIA.
I did. I'm going to prefetch probably your next set of questions, but before I spent 7 years at ARM, I was with NVIDIA for 7 years, doing a number of different roles there, but primarily in the notebook graphics space, GPUs, as well as ARM-based CPUs that went into all different types of laptops, including the very first Surface that was running Windows 8 on ARM.
Yes, those were the days. I had one of those. A lot of us up in Redmond had one of those. Unfortunately, not a lot of other people had them. That was the problem. But so cool. So now sort of full circle. I mean, just to touch upon that topic, NVIDIA and ARM kind of getting for you, it's kind of break out the old badge, I guess. And
yeah. It's something that came live last Monday. Obviously, the rumors had been out for a number of weeks. So some people were surprised, but some people were not so surprised when it finally was announced to everyone. Actually, last Sunday, it was supposed to be on Monday, and then we pulled it forward to Sunday. We're actually very excited about it at ARM. We think it's a really, really amazing opportunity. NVIDIA is an amazing company, has done some fantastic things over the years, obviously, and ARM efforts around client and data center, autonomous and such. When we think about what's going on, in the next wave of computing, where everything is going to be touching something that is around artificial intelligence, I think the opportunities for the two companies to be a combined entity in this new area of computing, the opportunities are somewhat limitless. So we're quite excited. Me on a personal level, sometimes when these M&A things, talking to the company on the other side, there's a lot of questions of, do I know these folks, and can we really understand what their language is? But for me, having spent equal amount of time in both places, I feel very fortunate to be in a position to be where we are on this, and it should be very exciting. And someone over there even pinged me not long after the announcement and said, "Hey, your email address is still available." So interesting how things circle back.
Yeah. I wonder if you get credited those 7 years at NVIDIA as part of your ARM tenure, or so how that works.
You know what? That's a really good question. I
might get a double hit on that one.
Yeah. In fact, Pete, you just that was not on the FAQ. That's a good one. I'm gonna go check on that.
But one of the things that's happened over the past number of years, I mean, what's been super exciting working with ARM is kind of the proliferation of where the ARM silicon showing up. And you mentioned kind of the early experiments, early efforts, I should say, on Windows on ARM. But we had kind of a relaunch or a reemergence of that tech a couple of years ago, and I know I had the pleasure of working with you guys on that. So Windows on ARM, Windows on Snapdragon, and all that stuff. I mean, it seems to be kind of a resurgence now on that as well. So what are your thoughts there? Oh
gosh, as I mentioned, the history with working with NVIDIA and ARM and Microsoft, for me goes way back. And having worked on the original Surface product, that was basically what we call back in the day. And if I just think back to the value proposition we were hoping to get from those systems, it was really around, extended battery life, always on, always connected, things like that. But, you go back those years, there was no connectivity story. So those were just obviously purely Wi-Fi devices. And the app story was really, really incomplete. I remember meeting with analysts early on. One of the biggest questions that I got asked when we were going to press reviews was, will it run iTunes? And and the answer to that question at the time was no. And that was a bit of a killer, right? If you just think about, how people were getting access to music back when these products came out, fast forward to now, the landscape is so different, right? When you just think about how many of our applications exist in the cloud, B, the devices that have been introduced by third-party OEMs, and as well as Microsoft, have these amazing connectivity type of solutions that are brought forward by Snapdragon. So there's a great story in terms of connectivity. There's a great story in terms of app compatibilities on Windows 10 with everything running across. So
including iTunes, by the way. So iTunes now runs.
iTunes runs, and I bet you if I went through and asked that same analyst and told him that iTunes ran successfully on these Windows devices, he would not care. But yeah, the experience is great. We use a lot of them inside of ARM. In fact, when I was living in the UK, I used to use it all the time on the train because the Wi-Fi was actually spotty on the train, and the cellular worked pretty good. And it was a great device to use, and not the least of which I would literally leave my power supply, back in the flat in during the day. I wouldn't bring it with me, wouldn't need it. And so the devices have really advanced, and there's just more great things to come.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I use the Galaxy Book, as my main PC, and it's a game changer. I mean, when you don't have to worry about power and connectivity, all of a sudden sort of it's like a behavioral change, in how you use a PC. So it's pretty cool stuff. And then I guess the other big thing where making a lot of headway with partners is in the cloud.
Yep.
And sort of, bringing a lot of, low power. A lot of times people think of low power as battery life, but it's not just battery life. It's just low power, a greener, more a smarter consumption of power overall, especially in a big data center.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. ARM has been working on products for the data center for actually a long time, even from back in the time when I was at NVIDIA. ARM was working with early partners around SoCs for the data center and such. Like everything else, over 10 years, a lot of things have changed. Confluence of a lot of work being done on the engineering side to get great products. We've gone from 32-bit to 64-bit. The performance has increased. Geometries have also gone in such a way that you've gone from 10 to 7 to 5 nanometer type of technologies now, so you can get some very, really powerful type of processing. And then just again, like any technology trend, you need a confluence of a number of things to take place. 10 years ago, we were thinking largely about the enterprise. We weren't thinking as much about the cloud. And what has happened with everything kind of moving towards the cloud, to your point, it's put such a premium on data efficiency, on power. These cloud data centers typically have a very, very fixed power budget and a very fixed area where they put the compute capacity. So efficiency really, really matters. It's really, really important. And we continue to innovate in this area. We've introduced some new products. Our Neoverse V1, which has scalar vector processing for HPC and high-end computing. Our N2 platform, which is 40% more efficient than our N1 platforms. And, we've seen some of the large hyperscalers, including AWS, who have announced products based upon our N1 with their Graviton 2 processors. So, and they've talked very publicly about a 40% power advantage and at the same performance level versus the competition. So, yeah, it's very real. And people might think, oh my gosh, it's happened overnight. And you run this industry a long time. It doesn't. That's right. It's a long effort by a lot of partners and a lot of people inside of ARM. But yeah, now I think confluence of a lot of things in the marketplace, it's really starting to take off.
Yeah. I mean, it's true for a lot of things. It's a matter of the right time and the right tech and the right need for it to all come together. Actually, interesting anecdote, just to circle back to the PC discussion. We were first working on the Windows on Snapdragon PCs. We had a big beta test inside of Microsoft, and we handed them out to all of our engineering managers and stuff. And, we started to get bug reports that the battery meter was not working right. Because it was just kind of always full. And it turned out the battery meter was working fine. It's just people weren't used to the fact that this thing would last for 20 hours. And so it was an interesting discussion with folks. That's actually how it's supposed to work.
It's a game changer, like you said.
Yeah. So let's get to IoT. I mean, this is called the IoT Unicorn, so we might as well dig into that. I mean, probably the real fascinating things happening on the edge, the far edge, the near edge. The definition of the edge is kind of depends on where you're standing, I guess. But ARM at the edge and things that are happening out there. I mean, what do you see as kind of disruptions that we should be expecting, beyond kind of just incremental things getting faster and less power? But what's the view there? I mean, one of the interesting things for our listeners that aren't aware is as an IP license, like pretty far up the food chain. So you get probably one of the best long-term views of what's happening in the business over the next, whatever, 5 years. But be curious on the IoT and edge side, like where do you see things heading?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and that area is evolving fast. Even over the last number of years, we've seen a real acceleration of activity and innovation in that space. And particularly around the area of that, these edge devices are increasingly becoming small computers in of themselves. Mm-hmm. When IoT kind of kicked off with vigor inside of ARM, as we were talking to companies about this, it included a small microcontroller with potentially a sensor and a Bluetooth connector that could send the data back somewhere. Now you're talking about a heavy degree of compute power. You're talking about machine learning at the edge. Increasingly, we have partners who are looking to not only use our microcontrollers that have extensions for machine learning, but even tiny NPUs, tiny ML doing some level of inference at the edge. Yeah. And with that, you have a much different requirement for security because now these devices are small computers. They're dealing with a tremendous amount of data. The data needs to be protected. You need to ensure that you have an architecture that will keep the data secure. So we've done a lot of work with our partners around an innovation that we call the platform security architecture, which does a number of things. We've done a lot of work over the years around root of trust and things of that nature. With this platform security architecture, we actually allow for third parties to certify the devices that will essentially assure a level of data encryption and security going up the line. And with that, I think it just all feeds onto itself, relative to these are small computers. These small computers are doing more and more compute intensive tasks. They're sending more and more data through the cloud. You then have 5G that is also adding more bandwidth and more compute capability. So what that basically means is you just start pushing from the data center to the edge. The amount of compute capacity is going up exponentially. And I think over the next number of years, these edge devices are going to become even more powerful and more sophisticated in terms of the capability. And you'll have a very interesting trade-off between the applications that run with that edge device at the node next to it, things that are cloud native, where the app can be running in a number of different spots. I think honestly you see huge innovation. And that's going to mean, certain things like autonomous entities, not necessarily cars. Obviously, the cars are one of the most popular areas that get a lot of attention, but drones and robotics and things that can run at a much more sophisticated way, factory floor robotics, all kinds of things around managing warehousing and things of that nature. All of this is going to become much more intelligent and much more sophisticated. And then, back to the NVIDIA ARM potential about the age of AI. These devices will learn. They'll get smarter. And as they get smarter, that again builds on having the compute capability. So I know it sounds a bit of a cliche, and I've been around the industry, probably see at least a number of these waves of computing. Sure. But we're definitely into it. We're definitely into another very large one. And 5G, because the additional bandwidth is going to be able to enable a lot of that. Yeah,
I think, I think I had this discussion with Rob Tiffany from Ericsson on the last episode or 2 episodes ago, but we were talking about kind of the confluence of 5G, AI, and IoT, like sort of three, these, it's like peanut butter, chocolate, and whatever the third thing is, but the metaphor kind of breaks down after that. But it's like you get these, ultra low latency, high performance networks combined with AI, which you could either do at the edge or the cloud or somewhere in between, with, the concept of Internet of Things, which is just, things connected to the cloud and sending intelligent data back and forth and actuating in real time. And then all of a sudden you've got some really potential transformative scenarios there, right? Yeah. And so I think, it's a sort of like, and I've had Qualcomm on the show before and other folks, and like, we talk about IoT being a team sport. That statement of 5G, AI, and IoT is a kind of an interesting example, because you need lots of different companies to come to the table to work together on behalf of a customer problem, right? Because it all starts with the customer having a problem that they need solved. So Dev Summit, we're on the eve of Dev Summit, or the day one of Dev Summit. I'm not sure what the publication timeline is here, but it's a big deal. It's very exciting. Obviously this year kind of highly virtualized, but still exciting. I mean, do you have any kind of words of wisdom if you're an attendee for Dev Summit? What are some of the things you want to look for, try to get out of, and maybe first time visitors or whoever, like how do people really grok the scene?
It's a big change on a couple fronts. Obviously, first off, it's virtual. It's not live. So that's for starters. So go to your favorite search engine and search for Dev Summit, and you get all the details about registering and such. But we have moved it to a virtual event. For those who are saying, okay, it's virtual, I get it, but I never heard of Dev Summit. Tell me what Dev Summit is. Dev Summit is the rebranded name of the show we used to call TechCon. And so TechCon was the show we had every fall used to be in Santa Clara for many years, and we moved it to San Jose the last couple of years. So what's new is old, what's old is new. It's the TechCon show that we're now targeting really more towards broadly towards developers, although I would say we think 60% of the folks who have registered are software self-proclaimed or self-identified software types versus about 40% hardware types. We've got about 4,000 or 5,000 people already pre-registered. We think we'll have a bit more, when the time comes. It'll be very broad, as ARM, typically is in nature. We'll be talking about things like cloud native, chip design, autonomous vehicles. It will run the gamut of all the areas that we're involved in, relative to what it takes to integrate ARM IP in an SoC and what do you need to know about hardware libraries and partners in that space, versus everything around open source software and popular development tools and operating environments that we just talked about on the software space. There'll be a lot of emphasis around autonomous, which is a pretty hot area. A lot of areas also around cloud native. You'll see the typical keynotes from Simon, myself, and some of the other leaders inside of ARM. I would also encourage folks to tune in because there'll be some special surprise guests. I won't
can imagine.
Give that away at this point in time, but it should be a very, very interesting and fun event. We have our annual ARM partner meeting every August. I think you've been to it. It's not a public event; it's an NDA event. But I bring that up just in the context of we've had one rodeo with doing this thing virtually. So I'd like to think we've got some good practice in terms of things that the do's and don'ts in terms of doing something from a virtual standpoint. But it should be very, very good. We're looking forward to it.
Cool. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Microsoft's done a number of events now virtual, and I don't think we published the data, but my understanding is the engagement we get because it's virtualized, you get so much broader engagement. We get so many more people, quote unquote, attending and engaged in the content than you would if it was only you have to get on a plane and go somewhere. So I think one of the kind of nice byproducts, I mean, if there is a nice byproduct out of all this craziness, is we are all building more muscle about how to enable people to be more engaged regardless of where they are. And especially when you talk about developers, developers everywhere in the world, and there should be. And now to be able to enable them to sort of plug in and kind of get educated and learn some new things. I mean, that's a fantastic byproduct.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. I mean, we would love to do these events live versus virtual, but when I think about the size of the developer community that exists, ARM is a fairly broad platform, as you know, and it would be really hard to figure out events that could bring all the potential developers who work on ARM, and it's all over the place, right? There are app developers, there are kernel developers, there are people who do open source software. It's a broad community. So we're actually kind of excited to do this thing virtually. It'll be a bit of a lab test to see how that works in terms of reaching the development community in a virtual way, but we're looking forward to it.
Cool. Awesome. Well, lots of stuff going on at ARM these days. So it was great again to connect, Rene. I think hopefully we'll keep in touch here as things transform into sort of the NVIDIA landscape. Maybe you'll get those extra years on your seniority. But that would be great.
I should get some credit somehow for that. I am going to talk to Jensen about that next time I have a conversation with him.
Yeah. Cool. Well, good. Any last closing thoughts?
As I mentioned, I listened to some of the podcasts you had done prior, and I really enjoyed them. And I'm very, very honored on behalf of ARM to join you and be part of what you're building here. It's really cool.
Sounds good. All right, Rene. Well, take care, and I'm sure our paths will cross again.
All right. Great. Thanks.
All right, take care. Thanks.
This is Pete Bernard. You've been listening to the IoT Unicorn Podcast, and thanks for joining us.
Stay tuned for the next episode, and feel free to give us some feedback at the IoT Unicorn at Microsoft.com. Thank you.